and Le'ilu Nishmat Imi Marati Rachel Bat Harav Michael. Also want to welcome our newest grandson, who is now has a name, Yehonatan Meir, whose Brit was Baruch Hashem this morning, who is doing well.
Mazal
So
Mazal
thank
tov,
you,
Mazal tov.
thank you, and
Beautiful name.
yeah, and we're ready to go. So tonight, we are talking about parshat Vayaytze a little bit, but I think we're going to also talk about a few other pointers before we get there, because one of the, I think, the key points in this in parshat Vayaytze is the fact that Yaakov has a dream in which he sees Malachei Elokim on a sulam that are olim v'yordim bo. And then at the end of the parasha, it tells us that as Yaakov is on his way, vayifke ubo malachei Elokim. Also, he meets angels of Elokim. So I wanted to look into a little bit of this concept of malachim. Now we know that the word malach, if I were to ask 99 people to translate the word malach, I am sure they would all answer angel. Hold on 1 minute. I have to hold on 1 minute, please. Kid, I'm in the middle of giving a shiur, so call Ema, please. Okay. Bye. Okay. So if you were to ask most people what the translation of malach is, they would probably say angel. But the actual word malach means messenger. As we have many places in Tanakh where we talk about ordinary messengers who are commanded by a king or a dignitary to, hold on 1 minute. Ta'ir. תזכור את הדלת הזה קצת. מלאכי, תזכור את הדלת. להתראות, בני בנות, להתראות. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have many stories throughout the Tanakh where the word malach or malachim refers to messengers who are clearly human messengers, not angelic messengers. And yet the same phrase is used in Tanakh for angelic messengers too. And the question we have to try to understand is, how do we differentiate and how do we understand? And I think that there are a number of places where the phrase malach or the term malachim or malachei is not barur. It's not clear to us whether we're talking about humans or angels. The most prominent of those is the beginning of next week's parsha Vayishlach, where the parsha tells us Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav. Yaakov sends malachim before him, and there's a difference of opinion among the parshanim as to whether these were spiritual angelic messengers or human messengers. But if we look through the Torah specifically, we find that malach comes in three different ways that malachim are referred to. One is malach Hashem, two is malach Elokim, and three is plain malach. And in general, we find that the term malach Elokim seems to be the less frequent one. Malach Hashem is the most used of all of these. And yet, interestingly enough, if I were to go through the Torah and find the word malach Hashem, I will find that it appears the most in the story of Bil'am, where 10 times in a very short span of one parak, we have 10 times a malach Hashem is referenced, either because the donkey sees the malach Hashem or the malach Hashem is standing somewhere, and then ultimately the malach Hashem speaks to Bil'am. But typically, when a malach Hashem appears on the scene in a pasuk, he generally has an active part. He is being sent by Hashem. And again, if we think the fact that Hashem, the four-letter name of Hashem, represents Midat HaRachamim, he is being sent presumably to help somebody who deserves Hashem's rachamim. So clearly, in the case of Bil'am, it appears that this is a malach of rachamim who's trying to save Bil'am from none other than himself. Because clearly it appears that Bil'am is dead set on going to try to do something that he knows he shouldn't be doing, yet he thinks he's going to, quote, circumvent Hashem and be able to um, curse Bnei Yisrael, and Hashem sends a malach to try to deter him on the way. So that's one point. The second, I guess, most common place where a malach Hashem appears is in the story of Hagar when she is running away from Sarai, the first time before the birth of Yishmael. And there we have four times the phrase Malach Hashem. First, that she sees a Malach Hashem, and then it says three times Vayomer Elah Allah Malach Hashem. Three different times it says Malach Hashem says something to her. And again, the concept here is a Malach Hashem. It is a Malach of Rachamim. Hashem in his guise as Rachamim is, again, I guess, trying to tell Hagar that she should go back, because that's what the Malach actually does say, because she needs to return in order to fulfill her destiny, which is to bear birth to Yishmael and to become the mother of a great nation. So clearly, again, it's a malach Hashem, not a malach Elokim, because all of these are midat rachamim. Somebody has done something, and Hashem is trying to help them fulfill and achieve their destiny. The other place where we have malach Hashem appears is when at the burning bush, where it says that Vayera Elav Malach Hashem Belabat Eish Mitoch Hasneh, that a malach appears in the bush, and yet, interestingly enough, there the malach has no speaking part, unlike in Bilam, where ultimately he speaks, and in the case of Hagar, where the malach Hashem speaks. In this case, the malach Hashem doesn't speak because ultimately what happens is the Hashem himself speaks to Moshe. The malach is simply there to, I guess, get Moshe's attention, to prepare him for his first prophecy. And I think the malach Elokim, perhaps in our parsha, may have a very similar focus to, again, be because the malachim in our parsha, again, they're just olim v'yordim bo. They do not have any speaking part, if you will. They're just moving around to, I guess, perhaps attract Yaakov's attention and perhaps prepare Yaakov for a nevuah that is going to come through this dream after he sees the angel. That says, the next pasuk says, "V'nei Hashem nitzav alav vayomar." It's Hashem who is going to speak directly to Yaakov. So I think that there's a common thread here between Yaakov's angels and Moshe's angel in the burning bush, both of which are precursors to Nivu'ah. And so if we think about the different ways that we have malachim, and let me go, before I go there, I'll go one more thing. There is one other story where malachim appear without the term Hashem or Elokim, and that is in the story of the destruction of Sodom, where it says, "Vayavo shnei hamalachim Sodoma," that the two angels come to Sodom, which again is a very, very strange way of putting it, because normally when the Torah uses the phrase "the two angels," hamalachim, it refers to something that we've already been introduced to. In other words, we know that in English, when I say the book, you know what book I'm talking about, because I've already talked about a book. Whereas when I say a book, you're not sure which book I'm talking about. And the same thing here, when we say malachim, that's one thing. But when the Torah says hamalachim, again, it seems very strange that the Torah introduces these two as hamalachim when we don't know who these two malachim are. And then later on in the story, it says, "Vayaytze malachim belot lemor." The malachim are sort of hurrying Lot, saying, "Let's go. We got to get out of here because it's time to leave. And if you stay too long, you're not going to get out of here." So there again, the malachim do not have a Hashem or an Elokim attached to them. Unlike, as I said, in the story of Hagar, where she's running away from Sarah, where it calls her the Malach Hashem, in the story of Bilam, where it's a Malach Hashem. Now, interestingly enough, in the story of Hagar and Yishmael, where Hashem tells Avram that you have to listen to Sarah and send them away, when the Malach comes to Hagar to tell her that there is a well, there he's called a Malach Elokim. Vayomer Malach Elokim El Hagar. Al tiriki shamalukim el kol hanar basher husham. So there also it does not say vayomer la malach elokim. It just says vayomer la. He calls her and he says to her, as opposed to in the previous story with Hagar where it says vayomer la malach Hashem 3 different times. It goes and says vayomer la malach Hashem at the beginning of each pasuk. Whereas here it's all one thing. The malach calls her and says to her, malach Hagar. Again, there it's called a malach Elokim. Now we know that Elokim means judgment, and my thought process is why in this story is it malach Elokim? Because Hashem by din, as we know, is saving Yishmael. Because all of the angels are saying, "Wait a minute, how can you save Yishmael? Well, look what his descendants are going to do to the Jewish people throughout history." And Hashem says, "No, right now the din is with him because he is at this point, he has not done anything yet that deserves him not being saved. And as such, it's appropriate that it's Kishama Elokim El Kol Hanar and it's a Malach Elokim because Yishmael is being saved perhaps not by Rachamim here, but by Midat Hadin. So, which now leads us back to our parsha where it says, "B'nei Malachi Elokim Olim v'Yordim Bo." And at the end of the parsha, where Yaakov is greeted by Malachi Elokim. So in each of these cases, we have to understand why it says Malachi Elokim and not Malach plain. And I think in order to do that, we have to first get an idea of who are these malachim who are introduced to us on this ladder. So we're going to bring a number of different opinions, and each of them we're going to then try to understand why they are referred to as Malachi Elokim as opposed to Malachi Hashem or Malachim Stam. So we'll start as usual. We start with Rashi's commentary. And Rashi gives us a fairly straightforward commentary for both the angels that Yaakov sees in his dream on the ladder at the beginning of the parsha, as well as the angels that Yaakov meets at the end of the parsha. Rashi says at the beginning of the parsha, "Olim techila ve'achar kach yordim." That the problem here, or the same thing that seems strange, is if we know or if we surmise that angels of God would live in heaven, so they should be coming down the ladder first rather than going up first. And Rashi comments, wait a minute, the pasuk says they're going up first and then coming down. So that is, Rashi says, Malachim shelivuhu ba'aretz ein yotzim chutz la'aretz v'yalu l'rakia, that angels that escort Yaakov in Eretz Yisrael are not allowed to leave to go outside of Eretz Yisrael, and they had to go up to the heavens. And once they got to the heavens, their shift is they are replaced by Yardu Malachei Chutz La'aretz Lelavoto. The Malachim from Chutz La'aretz now can descend to escort him. Rashi again basing this on the pasuk that we know that Hashem sends angels who we aren't even aware of to protect us at all times, and now again, and Rashi says the same thing at the end of the parsha where it says Vayivki'u bo malachei Elokim, that Yaakov meets angels. Again, these are the malachim shel Eretz Yisrael bo likrato lelavoto la'aretz. The angels of Eretz Yisrael come to meet him in order to provide him with his proper angelic escort once he re-enters Eretz Yisrael at the end of the parasha. So Rashi seems consistent in his commentary about these angels, who they are, and again, The concept here of why they are Malachei Elokim, because Yaakov, because of his connection, or his, I guess not connection, his relationship with Hakadosh Baruch Hu, is by din, it has angels that protect him all the time, and therefore it's Malachei Elokim rather than Malachei Hashem, or Stam Malachim that are escorting him. Um, Rashbam very much disagrees with Rashi that there's any significance. He says very simply, Olim v'yordim. He says, Lefi pshat, according to the simple interpretation of the text, Ein ledaktek b'mashiktim olim liyordim. There's no reason to say that there's anything special about the fact that they go up first and go down first. Ela shekain derech eretz laskir aliyah kodem yerida. That it's simply derech eretz. It's the normal way of speaking that we talk about going up and down. We don't say going down and up. I guess that's just normal standard parlance according to Rashbam. There is absolutely no reason that we should assume that there's anything special. Who they were, Rashbam does not address, but he simply says that we shouldn't read anything specific into the fact that they were going up first, then coming down. That Rashi wants to read into it based on his interpretation. Okay, Ramban first begins by addressing the whole concept of the chalom. And he says that firstly, we have to understand that very clearly this is not an ordinary dream. This is clearly a prophetic dream. And as such, we need to understand what is the message that God is trying to convey to Yaakov. Ramban tells us very simply, Ki kol hanase ba'aretz naseh al yedei hamalachim v'kol b'gzerat elyon aleihem. That the world runs through God's command, and God has no shortage of messengers, whether they are angelic messengers or human messengers, to make sure that things are carried out according to plan. So akol b'gzerat elyon aleihem, himalachei Elokim. So therefore, there are messengers sent by Elokim, by God, as the judge, to ensure that things that need to be carried out in God's account books, to ensure all the accounts are reconciled properly. This is their function, and we should not, and really that Yaakov, as the progenitor of Am Yisrael, has to fully understand that as he's about to embark on his great journey that is really the beginning of his life. Not that it's the beginning of his life, but it's the beginning of his life as now the leader or the founder of Am Yisrael, because it's on this journey that he is going to have his children, that he is going to begin the formation of Am Yisrael rather than just a single individual as we have with Avram and Yitzchak, or a single nuclear family. Yaakov is now going to found 12 nuclear families, 12 tribes, and clearly is the beginning and the foundation stone of Am Yisrael. And as such, perhaps this is why this is now what that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives him this message, so he should understand clearly what is going on. Ramban then goes further to bring a midrashic aspect of this prophetic dream. He quotes Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, and he says, "Valdad Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, Haita zot hamar'eh ki'inyan bein habitarim li Avram." That he compares this prophecy, this nivuah, to the nivuah that Avram Avinu has at the Brit Ben Habitarim, where Hashem tells him that your Yadoa Teda ki ger yeh zaracha be'eretz lo lahem v'avadu minu otam arba me'ot shana. Just like Hashem tells Avram about the galut in Mitzrayim, Yaakov is shown the entire panorama of Jewish history and all of the galuyot and all of the kings or empires that are going to rule over Am Yisrael. Ki herahu memshelet arba malchiyot umalatam v'yeridatam. Hashem shows Yaakov in this dream all of the different empires that are going to rule over the Jewish people, how they are going to rise up as empires, and how they're ultimately going to be cast down and their empires are going to end. V'zet tam malachei Elokim. These are the Malachei Elokim. These are the different emissaries or sarim of the different nations. Kemoshe Nemar b'Daniel, like just like in Daniel, where he has a prophecy about the four different kingdoms. There is the Sar Malchut Yavan, Sar Malchut Parad, etc., all of the different. But in the end, the key message that Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to convey to Yaakov, just like he wants to convey to Avram at Brit Ben Abasarim, at the end, after this exile, V'dor Revi Yashuvu Hena, that there will be, the Jewish people will survive this exile and will ultimately return to Eretz Yisrael. So too, V'vtichok hu yit'ale yihyeh imo v'chol asher ylech b'nei yishmerenu v'yatzilenu miyadam, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reminds Yaakov that he will be with him not just in his personal exile in with Lavan, but throughout all of the exiles of Am Yisrael. Hashem will be with Am Yisrael. He will ensure that they survive and ultimately will bring them back to Eretz Yisrael, where they will ultimately rule over Eretz Yisrael and usher in a period, a time where all humanity will recognize and acknowledge HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so that was Ramban quoting Rabbi Eliezer, Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, as this whole concept of the angels representing the different galuyot, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the purpose of the Nevuah is that we, no matter where we, the Jewish people, find ourselves, both from a geographic perspective and a historic perspective, as well as a relationship with our host nation when we're not in Eretz Yisrael perspective, we should never despair. We should know that Hashem is here. He promises the Jewish people that we will survive, and that we will ultimately return to Eretz Yisrael. And that lesson, as I said, is important clearly for Yaakov as an individual, but it's much more important that for Am Yisrael throughout the history to know and always take that to heart as a critical component of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's promise to us, Am Yisrael. Chizkuni. Chizkuni has a very interesting take on the concept of these angels. He doesn't really identify them, but he wants to understand why they are considered olim v'yordim. He, despite as I said, Rashbam, who says there's no rationale to olim v'yordim, Chizkuni has a completely different take. He says olim v'yordim abo, and he quotes what Rashi says olim tchilav yachach yordim, but he says this is Vinisharim lemata. In other words, the angels go up and then they come down and they stay below. Adam ha'olem min habayit li'aliyah v'achakach yored b'bayit v'nishar b'bayit. He gives an example of a person who has an attic, who goes up to the attic, but he comes down to the house and he lives in the house. Ubishvil kach Omar. And this is why when Yaakov sees these angels, he says, this must be a Beit Elokim, a place where God is present. Kilomar di Ratam Khan. He is saying that, wait, if the angels go up and then come back down, it means they don't live up in heaven. They live here on earth in this place. Lekach olim tchila. The ilmale ein di Ratam Khan el lefisha hayololomar yordim olim. And if they really lived in heaven and were only coming here for a short visit, then it should have said they came down first and then go back up to home. So so Chizkuni is telling us that the point is that these angels who Hashem sends to Yaakov are angels who are going to stay here with him, going to protect him. Again, the same concept of that Hashem is sending his emissaries to Yaakov as an individual, as well as to Am Yisrael collectively, wherever they are, and wherever Am Yisrael is, that there will be their home, to be there to help protect Am Yisrael. And I think that's a rather interesting perspective, very similar to the perspective that Rabbi Eliezer takes, but I think it's the same conclusion, but it's a very different angle and a very different approach to the whole concept of the angel. Okay, having said all these different perushim, about who these angels are and why they're going up first and coming down first, and what the lessons we are to learn. Going to go in a that the Canaan goes in a completely different direction. Okay, in interpreting this dream. So far, all of the dreams seem to be interpreting. All of the commentators that we've read into seem to be interpreting this dream as, and clearly it makes sense because that's the seems to be the context of the dream, as Hakadosh Baruch Hu promising Yaakov that he will not only protect him in his personal galut, but he will protect all of Am Yisrael throughout all of their galuyot, and this is why it's such an important nevuah. But Datzikanim takes a very different approach. Datzikanim says the following. Firstly, the dream begins with Vihine Sulam Mutzav Arza. Datzikanim says Sulam bigematria Sinai. The gematria of Sulam equals the gematria of Sinai. Okay, so why is that? What does that mean? Shera'a dugma she'atira kadosh baruch hu latei Torah liYisrael al har Sinai. This dream of Yaakov is not what everybody else says. It is a dream promising that Hashem will give us the Torah at Har Sinai. Not that Hashem is going to protect us throughout all of our Goluyot. Not that He won't, but that's not the intent of this dream. The intent of this dream is that the future of Am Yisrael, the future of Yaakov's offspring, is to receive the Torah at Har Sinai. And that's why the Sulam stands for Sinai. And why in there? And it says the Sulam is Mutzav Arza V'Roshoma Gia Shamaima. That the Sulam, the base of the ladder, is on the earth, but its head, its top reaches to Shemayim. Keneged b'Sinai Bo'er Bo'esh Ad Lev HaShemayim. Just like at Har Sinai, the mountain was the connection between the earth and between Hashem, whose presence rests on Har Sinai. And then he says, who are these angels who are ascending the ladder and then ultimately coming down? The name Malachei Elokim Olim. Again, why are they going up first? Because these Malachim represent Moshe the Aharon, or that Moshe and Aaron go up the mountain. Moshe goes further up than Aharon. But again, this is a prophecy about Har Sinai. The angels are none other than Moshe and Aaron. And as humans living on earth, obviously they could not have come down first and then gone back up. They go up to Moshe goes up to receive the Torah and comes down to give the Torah to Am Yisrael. And the in the dream where it says Vinei Hashem Nitzav Alav, that Hashem is on top of the ladder, this is reminiscent of Hashem's resting His Shekhinah on Har Sinai at the giving of the Torah. So Datzikanim tells us that the dream perfectly fits Matan Torah. And the message of the dream to Yaakov and the Nevuah is that Am Yisrael is going to receive the Torah at Har Sinai. And following, I'm going to go one last commentary is Kleyakar, who brings a number of different commentaries, but one that he doesn't that seems to be different. He says, if we look at this prophecy again, it's a very different prophecy. Here it is what Kleyakar says. Why does it say that there are angels of Elokim going up and down? Olim v'yordim, and he says first going up and down. He says that Yaakov is shown a vision of the heavens with the four camps of angels who are encamped around the heavenly throne. And who are these four? These are Uriel, Sar Avir, Uriel, who is the one who is in charge of wind, Michael, Sar Mayim, Michael, who is water, Raphael, Sar Afar, Raphael, who is earth, Gavriel, Sar Eish, Gavriel, who is fire. So we have the four Aristotelian elements represented by four different groups of angels who surround Hashem's throne. Kiviyachol, as we have similarly in the Mishkan, where the Mishkan is surrounded by the four different camps who are this is as a dugma of Hashem's throne in Shemayim. And these four, if we know that we look at their nature, Sheteva Mayim V'Afar Le'Reid, Mayim, water and earth are heavier than air, so they will descend. V'Teva Avir V'Eish Lalot, but wind and fire rise. Therefore, it says Olim Shnayim V'Yordim Shnayim. Clear says these four group angels are the four angels. That two are represent elements that rise, and two represent elements that fall, that or not fall, but come down, descend. And again, what is the point here? V'nei Hashem nitzav alav. The point is that Hashem is the ruler over all of nature and all of the physical world. And again, through these four angels who are appointed in terms of each of these tasks. So each of these different commentaries try to give us a different perspective on these angels, who they were, what their purpose is, and I think, as I said, if we go through this whole lesson with angels, with Yaakov, and trying to understand why they're called Malachei Elokim, as I said, because clearly, again, if we go to each of these different commentaries, clearly the ones who talk about representing the four kingdoms, obviously that is din. Why are we subjugated to these four kingdoms? Because we have forgotten our mission as Am Yisrael. According to those, that it is the four powers of Hashem, or the four different elements. Clearly, again, that's Midat Hadin. Those represent Hashem's judgment. And according to, there was one other opinion. Now I forgot what I leave out here. The concept of Har Sinai. If this whole nevuah represents Har Sinai, they're Malachei Elokim, because Moshe and Aaron are as we have in the prophet Malachi. Again, Malach Hashem. They're Malachim who follow the word of Hashem, and Bedin, through judgment, the Torah is given to Am Yisrael. This is Bedin, not Berachamim, and hence it again fits with the fact that they're Malachei Elokim rather than Malachei Hashem. So again, if we just to very quickly summarize, I think the whole nevuah here of Yaakov's is clearly about the future of Am Yisrael, whether it is Matan Torah, that our destiny is to accept the Torah and to become the nation that teaches Hashem's Torah to the world, to humanity, or that we are the lesson of the nevuah is to remind us that wherever we go, Hashem will never leave the Jewish people, even though we may not have earned Hashem's protection. Nonetheless, Hashem will always protect, ensure that the Jewish people as an entity survive, and that should give us hope and faith throughout all of our galuyot, to know that ultimately we will be successful in restoring the crown of Hashem, which we hope we are able to do successfully. Bimheira v'yameinu. So I thank you all. I hope I open the floor for now for comments, questions, feedback, and who. So anybody. Don't all talk at once.
When you mentioned about the Malachim that came to Avraham,
yes,
right at the beginning of Vayaytze, you have Anashim.
Actually, I didn't mention any Malachim who came to Avram.
You didn't, because there were none. They were Anashim.
They're called Anashim.
The first time they were referred to is HaMalachim, like you mentioned. So if they're referred to then as HaMalachim, well, who are we talking about?
Well, that's
referencing something that we didn't see before. So what is the reference? If you say there's a Hey HaYediyah, what's that Yediyah that we have?
I think that in the entire the perspective that says that the three men who came to visit Avram are angels is based on that one letter Hey, because otherwise there's they could be anybody. Again, the fact that they say the language they use in speaking to Sarah seems to identify them as emissaries of God. The fact that they're
Hmm.
promising her that she's going to have a son seems to clearly mark them as some type of messenger of Hashem. And as I said, the fact that there's this Hey Hayidiyah seems to uh, promote the fact that we've already spoken about these people before. Well, the only people we've had in the story before was Avram talking to God and asking him to spare Sodom, or greeting these three guests. So these three guests must be somehow three guests somehow translate to Hamalachim, but it specifically says Vayavo Shnei Hamalachim
Okay.
Sodoma. So, which again seems very strange. We had three people there, and the two angels come to. So it is as I said, it's a very. It's not necessarily a clear passage as to who the two angels are. So yeah, and but that's yeah, that clearly creates a problem
Yeah,
because
but
they're not.
subsequently also they're referred to again as Anashim. They're not
Um,
referred to as
in
Malachim.
in the story with Lot, they changed from Malachim to Anashim back to Malachim. Okay, so they do have
Okay.
a little of both. Okay, so there both of them are present there in both in that story. There are both you're referred to as Anashim and they're referred to as Malachim, which
Mm.
again leads us back to the fact that, oh, are these the same Anashim that we were talking about with Abraham? As I said, the difference is that there were three with Avram. There were only two in Lot's case, and that's why Rashi, uses the midrash there to say, okay, well, one of them finished doing their job; he can go back
He
home.
left, right? So he went
Yeah, he
home,
went
right?
back home. So only two are left. The two jobs left. So there are two angels to do those two jobs.
Hmm.
And Rashi uses that whole um, story as his basis for the fact that, I mean, that's not Rashi, it's the Midrash, the basis for the fact
Right.
that an angel gets one job at a time, does it, and then gets its next assignment. Rather than being there are no multitasking angels. Okay. Any
Yeah.
other
I'm just
questions?
looking. I'm looking to see when when it reverts back to Malachim, but haven't seen it yet.
It reverts back to Malachim when they're Vayaytze Hamalachim Belot Lemor, when they're rushing him to leave. You call
Okay.
them again Malachim. Okay?
Hmm.
In Pasuk, hang on. So hold on, give me a minute. I'm getting back to this parak. Pasuk Tedvav, it calls them Vayoitzo Malachim Belot Lemor. And then immediately in the next pasuk it says Vayachziku Ho Anoshim. They go back to being Anoshim in the next pasuk. Okay, so in Tedvav they're Malachim, in Ted Zion they're back to Anashim. And they were
Gotcha.
Anashim back in Yud and Yud Aleph, they're Anashim. I'm sorry, in Yud they're Anashim. And in the Pasuk Aleph of that parak, they are Malachim. So they do switch back and forth between these two designations.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. So,
Yes, sir.
all right. Any other
Thank you.
questions, comments? All right. Thank you all for
That
joining.
was
Have a
very
good
good.
rest of the
Thank you.
week. Harold, when do you head back?
Bezrat Hashem, I'll